The early eyewitness account of a pilot and pictures by an amateur photographer are disputed by the military.
The picture clearly shows a structured craft, so this is a game changer.
For the first time on national television, UFOs captured on film yet concealed by the government. In Utah, Chicago, and Puerto Rico.
UFOs are here, and we better wake up and deal with it, whether for better or for worse.
Why is credible evidence continually denied or covered up?
No government wants to admit that we don't know what's going on.
And will recent headline news reveal shocking evidence of what the government has known for decades?
There's a whole fleet of them.
December 16, 2017. Breaking news reveals that the Defense Department secretly set up a program to investigate evidence of UFOs and alien life from 2007 to 2012 at a cost of $22 million.
This revelation sent an absolute shockwave through the UFO community. After years of denial, it emerged that the US government was indeed researching and investigating UFOs.
Along with the news, the Pentagon releases videos of encounters with unidentified flying objects.
Well, if there's look at that thing. It's rotating.
The video evidence electrifies the world. But is this the first time the Pentagon was secretly studying the UFO phenomenon, even while publicly saying for years that it had no interest in the subject? UFO researchers say no. They believe the military has been covering up what it knows about UFOs for over 70 years. The story begins on June 24, 1947, in Washington State near Mount Rainier, just 2 weeks before the famed UFO crash in Roswell. On this bright day with clear visibility, longtime pilot Kenneth Arnold is flying his privately owned utility aircraft.
Kenneth Arnold was an experienced pilot. There had been a missing aircraft that the military had put a reward out for, and he thought, well, I'll go out and I'll take a look.
It's at this critical point in time that the modern age of the UFO phenomenon is about to begin. So too, the era of conspiracy by the US military to suppress what the public knows about extraterrestrial spacecraft. Arnold is cruising at an altitude of 9,200 feet just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon when he sees a bright flashing light about 15 miles away.
And this was a day where there was good, clear visibility. And what Kenneth Arnold saw was 9 strange objects moving at high speed, flying apparently in formation.
He had the presence of mind to attempt to measure and calculate their distance and speed. He knew the distance between 2 particular peaks in the mountain range where he was, and he was able to time it.
At first, he thought maybe the speed was 1,200 miles per hour, but then later it was calculated to be nearly 1,657 miles per hour. This was 3 times faster than any plane could fly in that time frame.
The Kenneth Arnold encounter is not only iconic, but it's also really revealing, because this is the first time in the post-war era that we really have something that we could probably say is of possibly extraterrestrial origin. We're looking at a technology that appears to be far more advanced than anything we had at that time.
The next day, Arnold talks to the press, and the incident gains explosive nationwide news coverage. It's the first ever credible sighting of UFOs over the United States. And thanks to Arnold's description, the term flying saucer is born.
When Kenneth Arnold related the experience, he was asked by one of the reporters, how did these objects move? And he used the analogy, he said, like a saucer would if you skipped it across water. Now, the media got hold of that and they used the term flying saucer. And in some quarters, that led to a misperception that Arnold had seen a saucer-shaped object, when in fact it was more delta-shaped.
People really forget what a great witness Kenneth Arnold actually was. He was a private pilot in his 30s, and to everybody who knew him, he was a solid guy.
Arnold's claim gains even more traction when two eyewitnesses to the same sighting come forward.
The sighting was corroborated by a prospector on Mount Adams who saw these things. He claimed to see 6 of these objects on the same day at the same time.
And then there was a Forestry Service worker on fire watch who saw flashes in the sky at almost exactly the same time that Arnold had had his sighting. He also said the objects appeared to move in a straight line.
After a few weeks, Arnold submits a letter to Air Force intelligence regarding his sighting.
Kenneth Arnold made a detailed report, and he included description and some very detailed sketches of the craft that he'd seen. Well, the military did an investigation, and they simply dismissed the whole thing and said it was a mirage. Well, that seems crazy to me. It just doesn't fit the facts.
Does it seem like the Air Force made a fair assessment, or is it possible the military attempted to suppress Arnold's story to prevent further dissemination of the facts? Fortunately for the public, further support for Arnold's UFO sighting appears just 2 weeks later, in early July 1947, over Phoenix, Arizona.
William Rhodes heard a strange noise, and he came out of his house with his camera, expecting to get a photo of a jet. And to his amazement, he saw this strange craft in the sky. He managed to get 2 photographs, and subsequently, the media published these with a story saying, here is photographic evidence of these so-called flying saucers.
Rhodes offers his photographs to the Arizona Republic, who publishes them on July 9, 1947.
Subsequently, Kenneth Arnold saw that story and those photos, and he said, that's exactly what I saw.
A side-by-side comparison between Kenneth Arnold's sketches and William Rhodes' photos illustrates the uncanny similarities between the objects cited. But then, within 48 hours of Rhodes' photos being published, 2 men show up to interview Rhodes: Lieutenant Colonel Beam and FBI agent Letting. Afterwards, Rhodes claims the men confiscated his film negatives, and when he calls the FBI, they deny all knowledge of the incident. Was this to destroy the evidence of UFOs? And is there a connection to sensational news of a UFO crash just 400 miles away at Roswell, New Mexico, reported the day before Rhodes' pictures were published? UFO investigators say one possible answer is that William Rhodes captured on film the same, now famous UFO that crashed in Roswell. And his experience with the government marks the beginning of an official conspiracy to cover up any evidence of UFOs. And despite the government's effort, the existence of off-world visitors becomes indisputable. Coming up, the cover-up of a stunning UFO sighting at America's busiest airport.
All of those employees were told, you are not to talk about this.
And they saw this gray metallic object.
In the early years of the UFO phenomenon, researchers believe the U.S. military attempts to suppress and cover up all information about UFOs. It's a successful effort, except in the rare instance when a sighting is captured on film. Case in point, July 1952.
July 2nd, we have a naval warrant officer, a man named Delbert C. Newhouse. And he's just traveling with his family. They're on a little trip in Utah. And I believe his wife is the first one to see what looked like very unusual objects in the sky.
Delbert Newhouse was a Navy officer, but not only that, he was a photographer. He and his wife were going through Tremont in Utah when they noticed something unusual. He stepped out of the car, grabbed his camera, and started filming.
Newhouse quickly records what will become the first ever filmed evidence of UFOs. Never before seen on national television, the film shows numerous unknown objects high in the sky.
Now, the film is quite damaged, but when you freeze it and advance it frame by frame, you can get a real good look at the fact that there are indeed multiple objects in the sky. Newhouse claimed that he saw 12 of these objects. Kenneth Arnold, back in 1947, saw 9 objects flying apparently in formation. In both instances, these were apparently shiny, probably metallic craft. Kenneth Arnold was a pilot. Newhouse had 2,000 flying hours, and he was an experienced Navy photographer. These are expert witnesses reporting extraordinary sightings.
Is it possible that Delbert Newhouse and Kenneth Arnold were seeing the same UFOs, but years apart? It's a tantalizing question.
It's impossible to know exactly what these objects were and where they might have come from. However, the fact that they were noticed, that they were considered extraordinary, is an indication that there is some sort of mysterious origin to them.
What's really quite interesting to me is that that film was studied at great length by the United States Navy and the United States Air Force independently during the summer and fall of 1952. And the conclusion was, not balloons, not birds, not anything conventional that anyone was able to come up with. This unknown aerial objects were nothing that they could identify in any logical way.
Even so, 4 years later, the Air Force publicly endorses an explanation that the filmed objects were birds.
A lot of people have tried to dismiss these videos as being flocks of birds, but that seems extremely unlikely because birds don't actually fly like that. I mean, let's be serious, that's a very weak explanation.
It's a curious conclusion, say UFO investigators, who believe the Newhouse film, William Rhodes' photos, and Kenneth Arnold's eyewitness account are convincing evidence of extraterrestrial spacecraft visiting our world. So why does the U.S. military dismiss such claims and reject what many say proves the existence of UFOs?
It's a huge problem for our government and our military to admit that we have had incursions in American airspace that we can't do anything about. No government wants to admit that they don't know what's going on. The military needs to project power, not confusion.
It was an absolute highest level priority through the 40s and 50s and beyond, to this very day, frankly, for a military to maintain maximum control over the formulation of this problem from a public relations point of view.
But what about a sighting decades later by dozens of people at one of America's busiest airports? Might this event provide undeniable proof that UFOs are real and expose a conspiracy to cover up the facts? November 7th, 2006. Chicago. O'Hare International Airport. At about 4:15 p.m., on an overcast afternoon, federal authorities receive reports that nearly 12 airport employees are witnessing a metallic saucer-shaped craft hovering over United Airlines Gate C-17.
Multiple witnesses claim that they saw something unusual. These witnesses included some mechanics, some pilots, and then there were conversations going on between some of these United Airlines employees and Federal Aviation Administration officials and supervisors.
Initially, United Airlines and the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, deny any knowledge of the event. They say radar found nothing out of the ordinary. But strangely, after their initial statements, United Airlines prohibits its employees from discussing the matter further with the media.
What we now know, without any question, is that all of those employees were told, you are not to talk about this. But one person did. One person wrote about this anonymously to the National UFO Reporting Center on the web. And that's how the story actually got out. Travel journalist for the Chicago Tribune, John Hilkovich, he thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to follow up on this.
And he does, on National Public Radio.
John Hilkovich, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
He confirms that United Airlines employees had seen something from out of this world.
They all tell a very similar story from different vantage points at the airport. And they saw this gray metallic object just below the cloud layer. And this object was stationary, but standing there for some minutes.
The eyewitness accounts are enough for Hilkovich and the Chicago Tribune to continue in pursuit of the truth. And what they uncover is stunning evidence of what really happened. Coming up.
The picture clearly shows a structured craft that doesn't conform to any known demand.
Every time we have these credible sightings, we seem to get this debunking from the government.
UFO experts say that the U.S. military and government agencies have been concealing what they know about UFOs since the 1940s. And now, officials from United Airlines and the FAA say that nothing unusual occurred at O'Hare Airport on November 7, 2006. But might the evidence prove otherwise?
A number of people had actually managed to capture photographs of this strange object. And apparently there were gasps of astonishment as this disc-shaped craft suddenly flew off, not laterally, but vertically. It disappeared straight up. And in fact, some of the witnesses said it went up so quickly, vertically, that it punched a hole in the cloud.
The picture clearly shows a structured craft that doesn't conform to any configuration known to man. So this is a game changer.
Although some authorities have suggested the photos are faked, UFO investigators passionately disagree.
You don't take pictures of nothing. You don't take pictures of the sky for no reason. What would be in the sky besides that object? And if you look at the photos, there's just this weird disc-shaped object high up in the sky, and that's obviously the focus of the photographer's attention. So I don't think in any way, shape, or form are those photographs fake.
Multiple photos, taken from multiple angles, taken by multiple people. Were they all in on faking them? Impossible, say researchers. Yet despite the evidence, after a 9-month inquiry, the FAA concludes the sighting is caused by a weather phenomenon, and no further investigation is needed.
I did ask a senior meteorologist to tell me a punch hole made in a cloud could be due to the weather phenomena. And he said the weather conditions were not right for this to happen. The FAA has been sweeping the idea of UFOs under the carpet since 1952 and maybe before that.
People might think, wouldn't it be easier for the government to simply turn around and say, we don't know what these things are, rather than to try and dismiss it all as mirages? Well, it doesn't work like that. No government likes to say, we don't know. Because, of course, government and the military needs to project power and authority, and you don't do that by saying, we don't know.
After reporter John Hilkovich in the Chicago Tribune newspaper file a Freedom of Information Act request, the FAA orders an internal review of air traffic communications tapes. And what they discover proves shocking. For the first time on national television, a transcript of a phone call between a United Airlines controller and an FAA manager in the airport tower. The participants in the conversation, recorded at the time the UFO was sighted, speaks about a flying disc out by C-17, that a pilot in the ramp area had seen the disc above them, that the United Airlines controller called it a UFO, and that the pilot had taken a picture of it. Knowledge of the UFO event, long denied by both the FAA and United Airlines, is overwhelming. Together with multiple eyewitnesses and numerous photos, the evidence confirms for researchers the credibility of the UFO event at Chicago O'Hare Airport.
There's no other word for this. They lied to the public. They initially said, we have no records of anything. Not true, they did. They said, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of anything unusual that happened at the airport at that time. And that all turned out to be completely untrue.
A very thick cloud layer that day. This craft was hovering below it, but then when it streaked away, it burst through the clouds. This thing created this big donut hole vacuum, indicating a tremendous energy force.
Why, in this modern day, would people cover this sort of thing up? One obvious answer to that question is air safety. This is one of the most heavily flown piece of airspace in the entire world. And the idea that some unidentified craft should just come through this, well, that's an air safety issue.
More to the point, researchers wonder, why did the FAA act in direct contradiction to their mandate to investigate security breaches at American airports?
What's amazing about it is you've got these incredible fundamentals of the case. You've got very consistent witness testimony. You have a definite heavy-handed censorship that originally was imposed over this, but that censorship was broke and the story got out. So it's a heck of a case. And then you have to ask yourself, what was this thing?
Every time we have sightings from pilots or military personnel, or even when it's filmed, we seem to get this debunking from the government as if they're trying to dismiss the whole thing. Are they trying to cover something up? Or are they trying to cover up the fact that they might not have the depth of knowledge that is needed to truly understand the phenomena?
As in a spectacular sighting in the airspace above Puerto Rico, a case where the government never gets the chance to control the evidence. Coming up.
Presumably someone connected with this video thought, we're gonna get this out.
It looks like it is rapidly tumbling. It loses altitude very quickly, and it's really fascinating.
The American government often refuses to admit there have been countless sightings of UFOs in America, yet the evidence continues to grow. Take, for example, an incredible event that occurs 1,000 miles southeast of Miami, Florida, on the island of Puerto Rico. On April 26, 2013, at 9:20 p.m. at the Rafael Hernandez International Airport.
The federal agents involved in this incident said they leaked the video because the US government seemed to have no intention of disclosing this incident. But here it was in the controlled airspace around the airport without permission and tracked on radar. They felt that whatever it was, people had a right to know.
And it seems the federal agents in question may have been aboard a Department of Homeland Security DHC-8 maritime aircraft.
We have this maritime patrol craft that is loaded with sophisticated surveillance equipment. The sort of camera that you would use to try to detect and stop illegal drug trafficking.
And as the aircraft takes off for a routine patrol, the crew sees something highly unusual. Immediately, they switch on the infrared camera. And what they record proves to be perhaps the most shocking evidence of an incredible UFO, the likes of which the world has never seen. The object is tracked visually by the captain of the aircraft and by a control tower operator who claims the UFO has a strange red light. Bob Spearing, field investigator and visual analysis expert for the Mutual UFO Network, studied the case.
What's incredibly intriguing about this video footage is that the object is in restricted airspace. It is flying at 80 miles an hour, tumbling as it's going. It behaves in a way that is not logical or has any known flight characteristics of conventional aircraft.
At first, the UFO appears as a forward-flying horseshoe, then changes its configuration to a more spherical shape.
It's an odd shape, doesn't seem to be aerodynamic in any way, shape, or form, yet it is speeding along without any sort of difficulty. It continues at 80 miles an hour over populated areas. At one point, it can be seen flying over a highway in Puerto Rico.
It looks like it is rapidly tumbling. It loses altitude very quickly, and it's really fascinating.
What we're looking at here is the object over water now. You can see the waves and the beach. It's about to go under the water.
And this is the most crazy sounding thing of all. It flies into the ocean.
Is submerged for several seconds and then emerges again out of the water. Here it splits into two identical objects. There is nothing known that can separate into two separate objects without losing velocity.
You know, maybe it's a possibility that we have a drone that can go in and out of water, but a drone that breaks in two, that seems pretty unlikely to me.
My conclusion is that this is truly an unknown object. It perplexed the military. They did not want to answer FOIA requests for this video. There is nothing normal about this sighting.
In August 2015, investigators from the Scientific Coalition of Ufology, a group with diverse backgrounds in science and technology, release a report about the Puerto Rico incident. It concludes that the UFO is in fact an unknown object. There is no explanation for its ability to split into two equally sized objects as the original, and it displayed properties unexplainable within our current understanding of physics. But it stops short of claiming the video is of an alien spacecraft.
Taken collectively, we have a really compelling case here. We don't just have the eyewitness testimony from these expert trained observers, but we have the film, and of course, we have the fact that this was tracked on radar.
It definitely is not technology that the United States or anybody in the world possesses at this point in time. So that implies, obviously, that there is some sort of otherworldly origin to this stuff. It's really rare to see any kind of footage of alleged UFOs and be able to say with a lot of absolute clarity that that's something strange and is completely unexplainable, but that's exactly how I would describe this object.
If this UFO is in fact an extraterrestrial spacecraft, might there be additional evidence of alien visitation that the military has covered up? The truth may be found in the most recent astonishing admission by the Pentagon. Coming up.
When an experienced military pilot says that what he's witnessing is not of this world, then you have to take that seriously.
It's rotating.
Despite evidence that the U.S. military has been concealing what is known about UFOs for decades, on December 16, 2017, breaking news reports an unexpected and shocking admission by the Pentagon that they have been investigating UFOs and alien life for 5 years, ending in 2012.
We all know that the United States government has been studying UFOs for a long time, but now we had actual confirmation.
Along with the news, the Pentagon releases videos of encounters with unknown objects.
They published the account of a very, very interesting UFO encounter by the United States Navy off the southern coast of California in 2004, involving 2 U.S. ships, the Nimitz and the Princeton.
The first occurs during a U.S. Navy exercise when 2 FA-18 Super Hornet jet fighters are ordered to investigate anomalous objects spotted on radar. Cockpit recorders capture both the pilots' conversation and their heads-up display.
Yeah, what's going on, bro? There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS, though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like that thing, it's rotating.
This is an object that exhibited performance capabilities that are absolutely off the charts. When you can outperform a Super Hornet, you're doing something pretty amazing.
The pilot is beyond reproach. The film has been verified. But what's interesting here is not what's necessarily seen, but what's heard. There's a whole fleet of them.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
What was the pilot seeing that was off screen? Was it a fleet of drones? It is a little early for drones, but maybe it's something in the U.S. military arsenal that the pilot was just not aware of.
One of the skeptical theories that always gets thrown out is, well, this must be our own technology, just some sort of cutting-edge drone that hasn't yet been publicly declared. Well, that doesn't really stack up, because if you look at the motion of this thing, it appears to be tumbling.
Well, if there's like that thing, it's rotating.
Well, no drone that I know or can conceive of moves like that. You know, it seems to be almost literally out of this world.
The second video released by the Pentagon involves former U.S. Navy pilot David Fravor.
David Fravor served for 24 years in the U.S. Navy, 18 years of which were spent flying. Expert witnesses don't come any better than that.
According to Fravor, he was ordered by commanders to investigate objects descending from 80,000 feet to 20,000 feet and then disappearing. He was told the Navy had been tracking dozens of the objects for weeks.
David Fravor said that he saw the object. It went into the water. It caused the water to froth. It was about 40 feet in diameter, and it looked like a giant Tic Tac.
From a distance, Fravor reports the object does not display the rotor wash typical of a helicopter or jet wash from a plane. Then Fravor flies lower to get a better look.
He circles around to intercept it as he's going down in a corkscrew kind of a dive. And he says the object began to circle around opposite him like this. And it then zoomed off at such a speed. He said he had perfect visibility of 10 miles and a practical visibility of up to 50 miles. This thing was out of visibility in 2 seconds. Now, that seems like at least 8,000 or 9,000 miles per hour.
The UFO speed is well beyond the 1,200 miles per hour top speed of Fravor's FA-18 Super Hornet.
On his highly sophisticated radar, he was able to see the object. And when radar locked onto it, it responded.
And in a period of only 2 seconds, it drops about 9,000 feet.
This is an incredible object that had performance that's off the charts. As Fravor often was quoted to say, I don't know what it was, but I'd sure like to fly it. Classic Navy pilot attitude.
In his testimony, Pilot Fravor states, "I can tell you, I think it was not from this world."
When someone like David Fravor, who is an experienced military pilot with 2 decades of experience, says that what he's witnessing is not of this world, then you have to take that seriously.
Even if some in the UFO community remain suspicious, they believe the Pentagon could be releasing these videos to prepare us for something even more profound.
This is the opening of a door, and they're gauging the public reaction because they're trying to get us to pay attention to what they're about to release, which I think is something far more dramatic and extraordinary than what we've already seen. The question is not what's on the videos, it's why are they releasing this now, and why do they want to give the impression that these might be alien spacecraft?
Could the Pentagon finally be coming to terms with the UFO phenomenon and their duty to keep the public informed? Perhaps. But some say the Defense Department, as it always has, knows far more about UFOs and alien beings than they will ever admit. Coming up.
The key thing in the report is they're actually acknowledging that a piece of a UFO was recovered. The metal itself was made somewhere other than the planet Earth.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
In 2017, bombshell breaking news reveals that the Pentagon has been investigating UFOs for years under a project known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. And at the center of the story is American hotel magnate Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace. When quizzed about his beliefs, Bigelow has hinted publicly that he may actually have proof that extraterrestrials exist.
We know that a large chunk of the Pentagon's ATIP program was contracted out to Bigelow Aerospace, headquartered in Las Vegas, run by millionaire businessman Robert Bigelow. Well, Bigelow is a passionate believer that UFOs are extraterrestrial. And when quizzed about his beliefs, he said, "I don't just believe this, I know this to be true."
Details of how exactly Bob Bigelow is involved with the Pentagon's program, some say, are nothing short of explosive.
One of the most important elements of this ATIP story, it almost has been ignored to my shock, is this acknowledgement that actual materials from allegedly crashed or downed UFOs are in the possession of Bigelow's company in a warehouse in Las Vegas.
According to breaking news accounts, Bigelow's company modified buildings for the storage of metal alloys and other materials recovered from UFOs.
There's one case in Ohio where a piece of a UFO basically was recovered. And upon analysis, it had oxygen isotopic ratios that were non-terrestrial, meaning that it was an alloy that actually had to have been manufactured with elements that came from other planets. So the implication is that the metal itself was made somewhere other than the planet Earth.
It's not just metal alloys. We're talking something known as metamaterials. that had come allegedly as a result of a crash retrieval. And metamaterial is a highly manufactured material. They don't occur in nature, and no one seems to understand it. And no one seems to know who made it or how they made it.
But what else could Bigelow's company have found that is causing such a sensation in the UFO community? Luis Elizondo, a former Pentagon official who led the ATIP program, claims
is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
The key thing in the report is they're actually acknowledging that there are metals that are recovered from UFOs. That's the important thing, not necessarily even what the results of the tests are, which are being kept secret and will probably never be told the truth about anyway. But the simple fact that it's being tested is a really interesting acknowledgement.
one other shocking admission from the Pentagon is that their secret program included the study of people who claim to have been in contact with UFOs.
We think Bigelow Aerospace got involved in looking at the physiological effects of close encounters on the witnesses themselves. Now, sometimes this seems to involve a study of electromagnetic fields on some of these witnesses.
They also apparently are really interested in the effects of plasma engines or plasma propulsion systems from UFOs on human beings. And there is one sort of theory, basically our physical bodies are plasma-based. And so if that's the case, then the effect of a nearby plasma engine source would probably be of great interest to somebody like Bigelow and the Pentagon.
For researchers, what seems clear is that the government cover-up has gone on for decades. Yet despite this massive effort to conceal and suppress, UFO investigators have worked tirelessly to uncover the facts. And now finally, the government is coming forward to reveal evidence of what it knows. But why now? Could it be that they are trying to prepare us for the ultimate news they have long suppressed? Is the day coming soon when the whole cover-up will end and we will learn, once and for all, that UFOs are real and that extraterrestrials have, in fact, been visiting our world?